In this video, we're going to do a little experiment. So recently, I've picked up, for some reason, I bought this brand new in the box Panasonic FZ300. This is a bridge camera with a built-in lens, and as you can see, it has a zoom range of 25 to 600 millimeter equivalent, and its competitor is going to be my trusty Nikon D500. And in this case, to try to compare the zoom ranges and the usability, I put on my Nikon 80 to 200, which I purchased at a pretty good price, but it is getting a little old. As you can see, I've got them right next to each other, pointing outside the window. Outside there you'll see various types of trees, movement, hopefully flying birds, where we can test these two cameras in a few different situations. Trying to spot wildlife, trying to get some stills of scenery such as maybe the palm trees there. I see a bird flying up in the sky right now. And also how good these two types of systems are at capturing video. Which one's better? So the Nikon D500 I've had since 2016. It is a professional crop sensor camera, APS-C camera. And back when it came out, it became a favorite for wildlife photographers and other types of professional photographers who preferred an APS-C size sensor rather than full frame, but wanted a really sturdy professional body to go with that sensor. On the other side is the Panasonic FZ300. It has a 1 2/3 sensor, so that means its sensor is tiny. What does that sensor mean? It will have less pixel density and 12 megapixels, even less than the pixel starved 20 megapixel APS-C Nikon D500. But what it does have is several cool features, such as this built-in lens, which can go from a super wide 25mm full frame equivalent to 600 millimeters, which will be around the same maximum zoom as that lens over there. But as far as the wider, it is way more versatile, dynamic, and easy to use, since look at the size difference. If you're going to pick up a camera just to get up and go, which one's going to go on your back quicker? And will the picture quality with the larger sensor in bright daylight have enough advantages over this tiny, versatile, but useful camera? Let's do some tests. Alright, I'm going to open up the screen door and we're going to take a look out to the great outdoors, and we're going to take some pictures. So I've framed both cameras with around the same shot. The Nikon is at 80 millimeters and the Panasonic is at about 128 millimeter equivalent, which is about the same for both cameras. So let's check out this shot that I've just framed up. So the first thing I noticed is the difference in the screens, and I actually think I like the Panasonic screen better because it's brighter, more contrasty, and has more colors. That could also be due to the type of picture profile it's using for the current picture it's going to take. But the screen overall, like even looking at the contrast, the blacks, the lights, the screen is a better screen. Although they are the same age cameras, and Panasonic typically has been known to have better screens anyways. That's one win for the Panasonic. I think what's more important than the quality of the screen is how good are the pictures that it takes. And I can already say from what I'm looking at, I like how the Panasonic looks better. But let's go ahead and shoot this shot and see how it looks. So let's go Panasonic and Nikon doing its focusing, and take that first shot. So we've got it. Alright, so on the left we've got the Panasonic FZ300, on the right is the Nikon D500. So the first thing I notice when I'm looking at it zoomed in is I am focused on the palm trees and not the building in the back. So of course with the FZ300 that makes much less of a difference, since it has a much smaller sensor, much more things are in focus. Now the next thing I notice is that the D500 sort of looks initially right out the gate that it's less exposed than the FZ300. But in reality, if you look at the palm trees on the bottom, they're around the same exposure. So they have different color science, different qualities. The D500 is more on the yellow side, whereas the Panasonic is more on the greenish side. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that, it's just different. But the other thing I notice is the walls on the building, they're closer to blown out, whereas in the D500, you're still retaining some of that data. The clouds also have more information in them than the Panasonic. But to be honest, the Panasonic to most eyes is going to look a little bit better. It's a little bit more contrasty and it has more pop, whereas the D500 has more of a refined feel and is also very pleasant to the eye, but for some reason just looks underexposed. But I'm pretty sure it's not So now we're zoomed in a little bit, and we get to see a bit more detail of how these sensors are really performing and the resolutions. Now note on the right side, the D500, I had it on the JPEG medium setting, which is about 11.3 megapixels, and the first thing you'll notice is that the FZ300 on the left is actually pretty sharp, but it does look a little bit artificial when you're zoomed in this much, and it might show when you're doing bigger prints. The Nikon D500 does have a little bit better colors in the palm fronds, despite them being around the same exposure. Although you do see the sky is a bit darker in the D500, that might attest to a little bit more dynamic range. But you be the judge, you'd let me know which picture looks better to you. Now let's do a zoomed in shot, something a little closer to anything. How about that palm front to the left that I can point out there? Alright, let me reframe this and come back. So for this picture, the FZ300 is at about 400 something, low 400s, and the D500 is about 300 millimeters. And I've got just about the same shot framed up. First thing I notice is with these picture profiles, the Nikon's on standard, and I believe the Panasonic is as well. And the Panasonic definitely has maybe around the same dynamic range, but definitely more colors. Here they are, so I'll go ahead and take these pictures. If I get lucky, I'll get a plane coming in a second, so I'll get the plane in the shot as well. The other thing though, before I take that picture, that I'd like to note is that one thing to consider is this Panasonic has an f2.8 lens that looks like it'll stay at that aperture the whole range. Holy cow. So that's a pretty cool feature, that it'll stay at 2.8 all the way up to 600 millimeter equivalent. Whereas the D500 I have, I don't think there's too many 400 millimeter zoom lenses that will stay at the fixed aperture. Motorcycle. So of course they're at much different settings and exposures. The Nikon is at 1/800 at f5.3, 100 ISO. Of course I want to keep that as low as possible. And the Panasonic is at f2.8, 100 ISO and 1600 shutter speed, which I don't think will give it that much of an advantage, because if you do get into a low light situation, I don't think you're going to want to use this Panasonic camera anyways, because 100 ISO is okay, 200 maybe, 300, 400 no. At least the Nikon D500 will do okay at 400 ISO to make up for a smaller aperture. What I see is that I'm actually thinking, although we already discussed the colors and the image quality as far as that goes, but right now let's talk about sharpness and how natural they look. So on the right, the picture with that lens is starting to look a little mushy. I think this lens is more focused on the very top middle on the right, the top middle branch up there, and that looks in focus, and all the stuff we're looking at in the front doesn't. Now on the left, we have a camera that has more things in focus, so it's easy for more detail to be in there. So in some situations it's good, some situations it's bad, but in this it seems to be working out for it, because the picture does not look very bad. Now I expose that one a little bit darker, and it has less fringing, and it looks pretty good. And at that zoom range, it's pretty good. So do I need to zoom into this one? I don't think so. I'm not going to zoom into it more, because the one on the right is pretty much unusable, and that's also my error as well, because in this situation I was taking some shots quickly and I wasn't testing that lens as it should maybe, but that also goes to show the camera on the left is easier to use, and it gives a pretty decent image at that zoom range. Alright, for the next test, I'm actually going all the way in. I'm going to 400 millimeters on the Nikon and 600 millimeters on the Panasonic. And here is how they're looking. Ooh, bird just flew by. I wasn't quick enough to get that. But just as a reference, you see how close I am to these buildings? Here's how it looks on this camera. So that's way out there. And this zoom is pretty convenient to have for wildlife, shooting pictures of birds, or if you're a paparazzi. So let's go ahead and take this picture and see how it looks. Oh man, the first thing I see is I sort of suck at photography. It's clear. So as you can see on the right, on the D500, I'm focused on the trees under it, and I wasn't focused on the building. For some reason, I don't know what happened. I'm sorry, but at least something's in focus in there. And on the left, here's what I'm seeing. At that zoom range, at 600 millimeters, I imagined it went optically to 600 millimeters, but if you take a look at it without even zooming in, the image has been degraded. It's like it's digitally zooming in, and that's what I think is happening. There's no doubt about it. Look at it. Look at it with your very own eyes. Alright, now I actually did it. I went and zoomed in a little bit more into both of the images. So here you can clearly see that I've made a mistake in my focus on the D500 on the right, but at least the trees are in focus, and you can see that even in this 11 megapixel picture. But on the left, you'll see on the FZ300, I don't know what's going on. I didn't imagine it'd be digitally zooming, but definitely looks like it. And you can also see a difference in the dynamic range, since now the building has sort of a similar exposure, but the trees in the FZ300 are way darker.
Now, one interesting thing that just happened is I noticed a pigeon has built a nest right here in my balcony. So I was going to go take a picture of it. Which camera do you think I took to take the picture first? It was actually this one. Smaller, easier to handle than this one, and also I thought since it's mirrorless, it might make less noise. So I grabbed this one first, and here's what I got during that little encounter.
Alright, so D500, no, I'm grabbing the FZ300. So let's zoom in, take a picture of this bird. So this is video, 4K video. The 4K video looks amazing, even at that zoom range. It looks pretty good. Now, I would have never imagined it, but I think I want to keep this camera. I like this camera. Now, it does have a little bit of an issue sometimes at extreme zooms where it's stable and nice, and then all of a sudden it like starts shaking like crazy, and I don't know what to do, but it goes away by itself. Now I'm zooming in even more. That is pretty impressive and sort of useful. Now let's take some pictures. Not bad, it's pretty sharp. You see now when you're zoomed in this much, you start losing some detail in the feathers, but you can sort of imagine that it's digital zooming like we saw before. Now the D500, let's take a picture. Now that is a lovely picture. You see detail in the eyes. It gets a little shaky because I had to lower the shutter speed, but overall they're very nice looking pictures. If I had a tripod, it would be even better. Now as far as video goes with the D500, the video is a bit shaky. As stable as I am, there's no way to stabilize that without a tripod and leaving it still. Even at that zoom range, a little bit of wind will make it shaky like that as well.
For this next shot, I want to test how they are handheld, because some situations you might not have a tripod. You might not have an opportunity to bring a tripod. So let's see how it works with these two cameras, handheld shots of things. Alright, so let's take some shots out in the yonder and see if we can find some birds to take pictures of. First, let's do this one. Actually sort of wanted to try was the eye autofocus. So you can just stick your eye up here, and supposedly it can detect where the eye is pointing, and it'll focus in that spot of the frame for you. So not really working. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Screw it. So I don't have it hooked up to anything so you can see it, but I put it on an AFC. I see it sort of like putting a box sometimes around where my eye is actually focusing at, but it doesn't focus on anything. Maybe I have to click on it so it'll focus there, who knows, but let's just take a picture and see what happens. One thing that's been bugging me about this camera is I can't figure out how to turn the auto exposure of the preview off. So it's not an auto exposure, it's on manual. So I'm setting the settings, but the preview is auto exposure. I guess it's for nighttime and so you can see what you're looking at. But right now, I couldn't figure out how to turn off, and it's really bugging me because I don't know what my exposure is. Of course I can use the meter down there, but on that one, with live view, I can look at what the exposure looks like. I can turn off the auto exposure, the preview off, but in this one I can't do that, and this is only mirrorless, so it's sort of like fooling me and tricking my eyes. Let's take up D500 and I'll try to take similar shots, so I'll take references from this. I noticed that the stabilization on this lens is way more jerky than on the Panasonic. And I have a pretty steady hand, but this is obviously definitely a tripod system, because if you're at 400 at least, it's not going to be good handheld. So in that case, I'm taking a few shots to make sure I have a sharp shot, which I've got. That bird's still up there. course, I'm giving it a few tries with this camera just to make sure I get a sharp shot, because it seems a little shakier.
One thing I did notice while taking pictures of my new little friend here with her little eggs is I believe for this viewing the footage, I felt like the Panasonic was a little bit more handy to use handheld, and even like on my knee or even on the floor to get a stable shot. The D500 with that zoom lens was a bit shakier for sure, and it had some jitteriness, although the Panasonic did have its moments. Sometimes it was smooth and sometimes it had a weird shake that would go away for some reason and come back for some reason. So tell me, which one of these two cameras do you think is better to just pick up and go and shoot? Pictures of wildlife, things that you need to zoom in for. Put your opinions in the comments, and thank you for watching. I hope you subscribe to my channel. Thank you everyone, goodbye.